Good evening, I'm Ika Ferrer-Gotic. Tonight we are revisiting international rule of law, criminal justice, Bosnia 92 to 95, Ukraine, Palestine, and much more. Venezuelan diplomat, former UN Security Council President, Sarajevo honorary citizen, has once more arrived to the city. His first visit to Bosnia and Herzegovina was in April 1993, exactly 30 years ago, during the siege of Sarajevo, and has since then remained a friend of this very country. His connections with the United Nations started in 1991 when he became the Permanent Representative of Venezuela. He remained in that post until 1994, serving as Security Council President on March 1992. In 2003, he was named Special Advisor to Secretary-General Kofi Annan. His Excellency Diego Arria is our guest on the show tonight. Good evening. Your Excellency, how are you? Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here.
It is a great, great honor. I hope you are enjoying the city so far.
I certainly am. I'm an honorary citizen, so I have to enjoy it.
You have to. And this is your country. This is your home, so you have to enjoy it. All right. We have so many questions to go through tonight, and some questions will be, of course, connected to the international rule of law and criminal justice and Bosnia 92-94, but I would like to go and refer, before we start, to talk about the current events in the world. So let's talk about Ukraine, first and foremost. For somebody who has been and has such a long career in the United Nations, when you see what's happening in Ukraine today, another war on European soil after the Bosnian War, aren't you disappointed that never again, never more is not never again and never more? Just taking in consideration everything that we have been fed from Ukraine in the past 15 months.
You know, Ukraine should have never happened had the international community done something here in Bosnia in the years of 91 to 95, because the Russians learned since that time that the Security Council will not do anything to an invasion of a country by another. So the lessons learned by them in Bosnia facilitated the decision that they had on Crimea and Ukraine in general. Like, lesson was not learned by the international community. On the contrary, they said they opened the door for what's happening today in Ukraine.
I think with this, you've pretty much answered the entire situation when it comes to Ukraine. And for somebody who has such a long career in the United Nations, do you think, is it safe now to say that Ukraine has been complete and utter disaster? Absolutely.
It's not only a disaster for Ukraine, it's a disaster for the Charter of the United Nations. When you watch that during the Russian presidency, the same day that he's presiding the council, Putin is invading Ukraine. And that's the highest political body in the world. So you can imagine what that meant. It meant absolute disdain and rejection of international law and specifically the Charter of the United Nations.
I think my next question will be self-spoken question, probably, a question that has been asked by so many journalists and never been really answered. When we see and when taking in consideration what you are telling us now, what is the international community task in the world, and is anyone safe after what we've seen in Bosnia, after what we are seeing in Ukraine today? Why are we having it?
You know, I've thought many times, what is the international community? People use this freely. Anytime there is an issue, it's referred as the international community. And basically, the international community has been limited to the American intervention and leadership. In a way, the United States have found another way to call itself the international community. Even in Ukraine, the main leader has been again the United States. And, but what's happening now in the heart of Europe, in Ukraine, is making the whole world realize, to understand probably for the first time, the value of preserving human rights, etc., and sovereignty. I hope that the lessons learned in Ukraine will be valid for the future, because otherwise it will be like we were saying. Tomorrow can be the invasion of the Baltic states, or Finland, Sweden, or any other African country. And I believe that in the conflict or the tragedy of Ukraine, is the world is at stake. The future of the behavior of governments is at stake. Goes beyond the Ukrainian people.
Goes way beyond. What do you think that is the most likely scenario for Ukraine today? What would be the peace agreement? Is it something that's going to be similar to what happened in Bosnia? Peace agreement, Dayton peace agreement that led 30 years of complete blockade of whatever we are trying to have, a sense of normalcy, a normal life here. What is the most likely scenario for Ukraine? What do you think that will be?
Well, I hope it will be different to the Bosnian case, to start with. Bosnia was forced to accept an agreement, the Dayton and Paris Agreement, which has rendered this country constrained, put the brakes for the opening up, and actually has created the only place in the world where there is a high representative, which means that there is no sovereignty. And even though people forget that the only country that is a member of the United Nations is Bosnia and Herzegovina, it is not the so-called Srpska Republic or the Federation. And this has a great value that I believe should be exposed more to the world. To begin to believe that Ukraine will accept something like Bosnia will be suicidal. I believe it's more than enough to know what's happening here, to know that this should never be repeated. And if it is true that it stopped the war at one point, maybe if it lasted a couple of more months, the Bosnians would have won the war together with the Croats. That was the reason, I believe, that Dayton was pushed and forced in time, because they were afraid that what they consider an emerging Muslim state in Europe would gain the upper hand in the conflict.
Those are very, very honest and strong words. Very truthful, though. But if we take in consideration that Russian state, Russian Federation, learned from the lessons from Bosnia that it can happen anytime, anywhere, don't you think then, just going by that logic, that there could be a peace agreement that is very beneficial for the Russian Federation is also another lesson that the international community has not learned, and that there could be a peace agreement that is widely beneficial to the aggressor, to the invaders, which is Vladimir Putin?
Well, here, the main culprit of the war was rewarded. They gave him the Republic Srpska, and they gave him Srebrenica, which from the beginning was the objective that Milosevic and Karadzic and Mladic had. I believe it would be a fatal blow, any peace agreement that in one way or another, similar to the Bosnian case. I think the Bosnian case, that, in my view, has hurt so much the people of this republic, should be learned by the Ukrainians, who I'm sure are watching, what happened with these famous peace agreements. You cannot have a peace agreement with an aggressor of the nature and the capacities that Russia have. You have to be a total withdrawal from Ukraine, including Crimea, which I still don't understand why the international community keeps putting a red line on Crimea. Like, well, it is not as important, or it is too important. That's a fundamental issue.
And now we see that Russian President Vladimir Putin is sought by the International Criminal Court. Do you think he will ever appear before justice for the crimes he committed in Ukraine, for the invasion, for the terror that he's putting this Ukrainian civilians under, as well as do you think that there is a force that will have the power and the courage to deliver Vladimir Putin to justice?
Let me put an optimist drop into our conversation. Mm-hmm. I met Milosevic in New York when he went to New York. Mm-hmm. He never thought that the international justice would reach him. Even when we created a tribunal for former Yugoslavia, the New York Times and other media said we had created that to prove that we were doing something, but no one will be of importance will be judged. 10 years later, I went to The Hague and I was a witness for the prosecution of Milosevic. Mm-hmm. And so I remember I entered the tribunal. I did like this to Milosevic. He nodded too, like saying, I told you.
Oh, wow.
And so in the case of Putin, you can say it's a nuclear power, but there are things could happen internally that could change the political structure of Russia. And if that happens, Putin will be a candidate to actually to pay for the consequences of his action.
You think that something could change within the state, such as change of mentality, change of power? Because we know there is part of Russia that completely disagrees with what Putin is doing right now in Ukraine. But of course, they're silenced. Do you think that's possible anytime soon?
You know, it is. I believe possible. It's impossible to forecast. But what is possible to forecast is that this conflict. We call it. He gave it a name, not a war. Forgot the name that Putin gave to his...
special military operation.
It's not going as well as he thought. And this should have internal repercussions. Mm-hmm. Already more than 100,000 Russian soldiers killed, and more to come, and no benefit in short view for him. So we can only hope that the Russian people react. Will not be easy because of the power. He is a dictator. He controls all the media, puts in jail all the opposition. So to fight against that kind of a power is very difficult.
I want to go to another topic before we go to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Palestine, Israel conflict. This dates way back to the 19th century. In 1947, the United Nations adopted Resolution 181, and known as a partition plan, which sought to divide the British Mandate of Palestine into Arab and Jewish states. Now, there are concerns, and we know now that only in October 2020, Israeli court ruled that several Palestinian families living in Sheikh Jarrah, a neighborhood in East Jerusalem, were to be evicted in May 2021, with the land handed over to Jewish families. And we know now as well that the number of Palestinians killed in Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank since the beginning only this year, and we are now in the fifth month of 2023, has reached 95, including 70 minors and 2 elderly. Now, my question is, and this is what we usually struggle a lot, especially journalists, why is it then when journalists report on the unlawful displacements of the Palestinians, killings of the innocent civilians, immediately labeled as anti-Semitic? How do we change that? How do we consider this conflict as a conflict that needs international focus, more international focus, without being labeled as anti-Semitic or deniers of Holocaust? And why is the international community and United Nations somehow turning a blind eye to this part of the world? A lot has been happening. Nothing has been done. Why is it so?
You know, you're touching precisely on a topic that it's like a dead weight on the head of the United Nations. They have not been able, actually, to navigate. Of course, it's not only difficult, but there are so many political interests outside the region that have to do with what's happening with the Palestinians and Israelis. And you said it very well. In one side, you can be anti-Semitic or you are the Holocaust denial. And for example, at the United Nations, every time that there is a resolution by the General Assembly to condemn Israel, out of the 193 countries, 190 vote in favor, which makes the Israel to understand and to appreciate that they don't have friends there, so that they cannot count on the support of the United Nations. And I think in many ways the issue has permeated into the major powers of the United Nations that also influence the behavior of the Secretariat in this issue, because they're touching on very delicate grounds that have to do, for example, the American Jewish population, which is extremely influential. At the same time, you're touching on the growing power of the Middle East. So, and in the middle of this is an organization that is now ruled by veto powers of the major countries, which makes it almost impossible to really take a firm decision or more concrete decision. When I was at the United Nations, I always voted in favor of a peaceful solution.
What would be that peaceful? What is peaceful solution in the case Israel-Palestine?
I don't think there will be a peaceful solution. It is.
So it is what it is.
Yeah, you know, it
Isn't that just
an appellation, peaceful solution. Everybody talks about peace. Not everybody works for peace, but that's a common word, which I believe has been losing meaning. It cannot be peace and people so joined together, so close, with so many killings on both sides, that makes it, from my view, almost an impossible case. That's why most countries do not want to really take part, because they don't see any favorable outcome.
Isn't that discriminatory then, because they're Muslims? I mean, can we just be honest here when we talk about it? Is it that?
Well, you know, when we talk about Bosnia, I believe that Bosnia paid a great price, because the perception was that this was a Muslim country and not the multi-ethnic, multi-religious
European country.
You know, I was talking 3 days ago in Budapest to my former colleague, the Hungarian ambassador of the UN, Andrei Erdos. And he shared with me, he said, Diego, you know, one day in the Security Council, I want to name the name of the ambassador, one of the permanent members, because it was my friend who told me, said to him, Andre, Bosnia was created by Tito. You know, it's
you can get more communist than that.
You know, 1,000 years before did not count. Yeah. So the history of the country was not even known at the Security Council. And don't forget that we, at least in my country, we didn't speak of Serbs or Croats, we spoke of Yugoslavs. For us, they were all Yugoslav. So Bosnia emerged because of the war. Otherwise, people would not know what we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I travel the world and people ask me where I'm from, I say from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Oh, I'm sorry, where is that? Former Yugoslavia. Oh, we get it. You know, that's still the case, actually, very much. Okay, let's talk about Bosnia and Herzegovina. There is, I would like to talk about Srebrenica. I would like to go to that. There is a very interesting term that you used in one of our interviews with one of my colleagues, and you said that in 1993, you were talking and you were speaking about the creeping genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This is 2 years before Srebrenica happened. You visited for the first time in April 1993. Tell me about your visit then. What was your recollection? What is your recollection of the events when you were there? And what did you mean by, and how did you know, creeping genocide?
You know, nobody knew what Srebrenica was about. There was, I think it was a British journalist who entered Srebrenica, who was on the siege by the Serbs, and presented the video to the world. I saw the video, entering the Security Council, and I said, the Serbs are surrounding this enclave, and we called for an urgent meeting that night, which at the end, midnight, ended up creating the safe area of Srebrenica. And ended up in a major discussion in which we got approval to send, for the first time in the history of the United Nations, a mission made up of United Nations Security Council ambassadors. And to the dismay of the French and the UK, who knew my position, I was appointed to head the mission. And when you ask me what do I recall, it is something that has marked my life in such a way that I could tell you minute by minute what I felt when I entered the streets of Srebrenica. First, I landed at the airport, and there were people, I thought they were Médecins Sans Frontières. And no, it was Serb doctors doing a triage to see if they would allow the Bosnian people who were wounded to leave. I could not believe it. And as soon as we landed, I understood that the United Nations had been lying to us, that Srebrenica had already fallen. It was not that it was about to fall. It had been falling already, and that the Serbs were really in control. And the United Nations...
You were told that?
In control.
Yeah.
Actually, we were going in armored cars in Srebrenica, and behind me in another armored car was a Serb colonel who was in charge of attacking Srebrenica. All the time under the condescending attitude of the UNPROFOR forces, the United Nations, that had that grandiose name of UNPROFOR, protection forces. They were not protecting anybody. They were just witnesses, and witnesses that did not report exactly what was happening. I was a witness against Milosevic, as you remember. And Milosevic, at one point, asked me, how long were you in Srebrenica? I looked at the judges and I said, Your Honors, the butcher of the Balkans believed that being 3 or 4 hours watching people starve, die, no water, no electricity, is not enough. The same question was asked to me during the Orich trial. I was in the defense of Nasser Orich. And an American prosecutor, a lady, asked me the same question. I said, Your Honor, this is exactly what Milosevic asked me. For her, it was not enough. She said, no, I didn't mean that. My last comment on that, the Grand Mufti here, 2 years ago, asked me, why did you say a slow-motion genocide is taking place instead of creeping? I said, which means the same. Yeah. And I said, you know, I have never used the word genocide until that day. But what I saw coming from a country that never seen a war was so horrible that only one word came to me, which was genocide. Of course, I knew that genocide was a forbidden war at the Security Council, because it would have forced the international community to act. So they actually prevented the use of war. And I said it in the Security Council when I came back, a slow-motion genocide is taking place.
What did they tell you when you said that?
Well, they said, you've never been in a war. You come from a country that's never seen a war. And so I know all that, and I've never seen a war. But to me, the human suffering...
And common sense, right? The common sense told you, I don't have to be in a war to understand what's going on here, right?
But you see, they tried, actually, there's a report. I got the other ambassadors who joined my mission, the Russian, the French, Pakistani, New Zealand, and Hungary. They were the other ambassadors. And I drafted the report where I included that, and they all signed. So, but they try to do meetings in more close quarters in order that this will not become so noticeable.
Behind the closed doors.
Behind the closed doors, because it was so scandalous
Your Excellency, why? Why not at that time you've done the right thing, but your colleagues, why not do the right thing at that time, seeing it unfold? United Nations would have had much more credibility today if they did the right thing. Why not do the right thing?
You know, I was the only independent member of the Security Council. Why do I say that? The 5 permanent members have a special interest. Pakistan is a Muslim country. Morocco had the problem with the Western Sahara. So each one of them has a specific interest. Our interest was exclusively the respect for the Charter of the United Nations and the defense of human rights. That's why we did the right thing. The others have to think which would prevail, their specific interest or the need to say the right thing. And in the need to say the right thing, they chose the specific, to defend their specific interest. But one day I asked one of the permanent members, I said, David, it was to the British ambassador, you know that what I'm telling here in the council is the truth. And he said, yes, you're right. But we cannot allow to have, he called it a tar baby in Europe, the emergence of a Muslim state in the middle of Europe. And I said, but they have always been in Europe. It is nothing new. But they projected the image that this was something new and that one way or another, the Muslims, in a way, their sentence have been handed down since the beginning when Bosnia was accepted in May 22, was accepted as a member of the Security Council. 2 months later, the United Nations resolution were proposing to divide Bosnia and Herzegovina, the newest member of the United Nations, to divide the territory in an apartheid. And apartheid has prevailed, and today the only country in the world where there is a sort of a nature of apartheid in the governmental structure, in the political, even the health structure, is in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
You know what's very strange when it comes to, when we're talking about Muslim states in Europe, Muslims have lived here peacefully for a very long time. Muslim families have done so much for the Jewish families during the World War II. And when you say Muslims today, it's like labeling the majority, the major group in Bosnia and Herzegovina as something that should be frowned upon. But Muslims in Bosnia and Herzegovina are European Muslims. They don't really differ from any other person, any other European citizen in Europe. Was that so hard to understand that Muslims in Bosnia and Herzegovina are not a threat to European democracy, international community democracy, United States democracy? I mean, was it so hard to understand?
It was, you know, I wrote an article in the Los Angeles Times called Haiti, the Black Bosnia, in which I said the Latin Americans do not care for the poor Haitians. Why? Because they say they are black, they speak French, they are not Latins. Here, the Europeans said, no, no, no. Let's keep Bosnia down because they are Muslims and they are a threat to the existence of Europe. Actually, in the beginning of the conflict, the country called Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina suddenly became the Muslim party. And who did that? The major powers and the Secretary-General of the United Nations changed, in a way, the perception, the name of this country as a Muslim party, which is absolutely absurd and false. And since then, the image that people have of Bosnia, it is, you know, a Muslim society associated somehow to the worst things that are going all over the world, when this is the most peaceful Muslim society in the world today.
Today, in the middle of the night, you can walk through Sarajevo and feel very safe. It's one of the safest cities in the world with diversity, even though if many try to deny that, but the facts are facts. I want to go back to Srebrenica. A couple of years ago, I spoken to Commander-in-Chief of the UN Forces Battalion, French Battalion, Air Forces, and he told me exactly what you are telling me now about Srebrenica. It's been already said. We knew what was going on. And when we were trying to make sure that we can intervene, we were stopped from intervening. We only revisited the place and took pictures from the air of the massacre happening. They knew it. It was planned. They were given the green light. This is why Mladic didn't look up, because he didn't have to. I would like to play that clip for you. His name is Guillaume Ancel. So he's a Commander-in-Chief of French Battalion of UNPROFOR. And I think it says a lot. I would like to have your comment on it, if that's okay. Let's play it, please. According to that, is the international community then responsible for almost 4-year-long siege on Sarajevo? And what about Srebrenica? Let's talk about certain places in Bosnia as well. What is your point of view and knowledge on that matter, Srebrenica?
Yes, my mission ended by Srebrenica. During 6 months, I was, I would say that, I was forbidden to strike the Serbs, okay? And at the end of my mission, beginning of July, Srebrenica happened. And so I was asked to intervene in operation
so
in
You
Srebrenica.
weren't there.
Yeah, no, I didn't accept to go because I said, but we were unable to strike in Sarajevo. Or do you want to tell me that we are going to do the same, that we are not going to do the same in Srebrenica, to come, to make us, but never do.
So you were sure, I said, you were sure that the same thing would happen?
Absolutely.
In Srebrenica.
So I just said, I will go to Srebrenica if I have the guarantee that we will intervene, because I will not expose the life of my men if it is just to see Serbs killing the people and that we have the right to do nothing. And so at this time, the chain of command told me, okay, so you are not going, and nobody goes. But in fact, they knew perfectly at this moment that we will never have the right to strike against the Serbs. And we have airplanes every 2 hours to take pictures, photography, that was a Reiki airplane, to see the situation. And so only with 2 hours late, we can follow the massacres of Srebrenica every 2 hours. And so when I heard the international officials at this time saying on TV that they were not aware of this massacre and that they were upset of what's happened in Srebrenica, I'm just, well, how to say that, I have enough of that. That's not true. They knew perfectly what's happened, but they decided not to intervene. I don't know why, but that what is sure, it is that there were a kind of agreement with Serbs that we will not intervene in this situation.
So
maybe
it is the international community knew about the Srebrenica massacre was going to happen.
Yes, because obviously Serbs know that nobody will impeach, no, not impeach, that nobody will try to stop them if they were doing that. And I remember something very hard. It is that the massacres were open on the ground, that they even not try to hide them when they massacred the population. So that was a kind of message to tell us, hey, have a look to what we are doing, and if we are doing that openly, it is because we are allowed to do that. And so I think it could be a very interesting work for the historians to tell us what was the agreement at this time who lead to these massacres of Srebrenica. It is relied to the blue helmet taken in hostages in Sarajevo just a month before, that it was the counterpart of that, the fact that they were released, or it was the counterpart of the fact that an American pilot has been crashed during this period. I think that was in June, and that the US said that search and rescue their pilots with a special mission, which was another lie, because in fact they negotiated this pilot with Serbs. And so what did they give in exchange of that? I don't know, but maybe it could be Srebrenica.
You don't know the politics behind it. You don't know the exact politics behind it, but it happened. Guillaume Ancel for N1, what is your comment on this that the Commander-in-Chief shared with us?
Let me take one step behind. When Carla Del Ponte was the prosecutor, first prosecutor, called me in New York and said, Ambassador, would you be willing to be a witness against Milosevic? And I said, yes, but why don't you ask the permanent members? Oh, because they say they could not anticipate what happened in Srebrenica. I said, they are lying. Yeah, he said, yes. We have read your speeches, we have seen your videos, and you will keep telling them that this is going to happen. So they live in denial. But what this French general is saying, his superiors, which also, one was French, didn't behave the same way that he's telling. Because something which would seem almost unbelievable, a week before the killings of July, the two main officers of the United Nations, General Smith was on vacation in Croatia, and Akashi, the Secretary-General Representative, was also on vacation. They knew perfectly well that the Serbs were already closer to Srebrenica, but they were on vacation. So it's something unimaginable. This is what happened. And then,
so you can't call them, you can't reach them while everything is happening. What a convenient time to take a vacation, isn't it?
And the two of them, the military and the civilian. So when they, and actually Akashi informs the Secretary General, begins to inform the day after the killings have already started. He said, I understand, and here, you know, when you have soldiers in the ground, you have the Dutch. So the complicity into the whole thing almost does not exclude anyone. In a way, they were all complicit. The CIA of the United States knew perfectly well because they were recording what was going to happen. And they did not inform on time. I'm sure the British intelligence also they knew about it. So the main parties knew about it. The only ones that didn't know about it were the people in Srebrenica, who were the victims of, I would say, of this international complicity. You can say complicity, indifference, but to me it's a crime, whatever appellation you assign them.
So everybody's complicit. Now we know that. It's safe to say everyone knew, but the victims that were slaughtered in broad daylight. Why is nobody prosecuted from the United Nations for the complicity? What about Yasushi Akashi, even in absence, even if he's not there? What about all those people that we know now knew exactly what was going on? How come nobody's taking any responsibility for it? Why not prosecute them as well? Because now what we're seeing in Ukraine, which is slightly different story, because Ukraine has the full support of the West at this time, even though, you know, Ukraine shouldn't have happened either. But prosecuting those who are in chain of command on the top would teach everyone a lesson, right? In every other conflict, why not prosecute chain of command of the United Nations? Why is that impossible? Is there immunity included? Is it, what is it?
You know, in any small village, if you're going to be sworn in as police chief or whatever, you say you swear that you're going to fulfill your promise, etc., etc. The only place where you don't swear to do anything is at the United Nations. So in a way, what you're telling me, and I agree, you can get away with murder. So actually, you can take decisions
even genocide, as we
that have life or death consequences, and you'll never be prosecuted. I said during the Milosevic trial that if the United Nations officials could have been tried, many of them would have been sentenced as Milosevic was about to be sentenced, or Karadzic or Mladic. But they know, you see, the meetings at the Security Council ends at 1:15 in the morning or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. After that, everybody goes home, but the fight continues. I said once Now, when you see the Security Council, like the paper you have there, you see a white paper in front of you with the agenda. It's clean, doesn't have blood, doesn't have tears, cannot scream. And it says, yesterday, 12 children were killed while playing in a patio in a school in Srebrenica.
You say patio.
In the backyard. And then, you know, you do not get the real feeling what's happened. That's why the United Nations never sent a Security Council mission during the war. Mine was the first one. And it was opposed by the main members because they realized that we will find out what was going on. I give you an extreme situation. The United Nations officials, the UNPROFOR forces, took the cameras from my ambassador colleagues when we entered Srebrenica because they didn't want anybody taking photos of these people that I saw. I refused. I was the only one with the camera. And the photos that came out of Srebrenica, the first photos, were taken by me, and I gave them to Reuters. And Reuters published all over the world. So the complicity to hide what was happening. I give you, I think, an example that is very powerful. The representative of the Red Cross International, which is a very prestigious organization, at the time, speaking about our mission, said the mission delegates shed crocodile tears because actually what's happening in Srebrenica, he says too many people arriving at the same place. He didn't make a comment of the people dying or starving. He thought that we were shedding crocodile tears. The Red Cross.
Imagine that we knew that then, or that we knew that then what we know now. You know, seeing the people in so-called enclave being gathered like that, knowing, being separated from men and boys.
If I tell you something,
you know, it's
when I was there, when I said this about slow motion genocide, we called the people in the school in Srebrenica, and I was surrounded by these UNPROFOR generals, and in front of me was a serf colonel sitting together as a comrade. And I said to the people there with the translator, I am here with my colleagues, the ambassadors of such countries. We represent the highest political authority in the world. We will protect you. And we never did. That's why I have not forgotten, that what we thought that we could do, we couldn't do it. And that's what has forced me to write about it, to continue talking about it, because I feel that it's not only my obligation, it's my moral duty.
Thank you so much for being so open, and I know you probably got in trouble a couple of times for telling the truth, but thank you for your service. Really, people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the region, they really need to know the truth. And even though if we somehow know what happened and you know...
Did you get a chance to see my book?
Yes, yes, I have.
Well, you know, thanks. I was very honored by the Council, the Congress of the Council of the Congress of Bosniak intellectuals, who translated and published it. And I'm very happy and very honored because I want the people here to know.
Absolutely.
Especially the young people.
We need it on the record, you know. It has to be said.
You have to be on the record.
It has to be said. We cannot go on thinking, oh, it's been like this, it's been like that. We are still, Bosnia is still such a divided country. It's because nothing has been, the major things haven't been put on record, and this is what it needs to happen. I wanted to go on a break, but I'm not going to do that. I love this deep conversation that we are having. I want to play another video, and this is also Sir Jeffrey Nice, the former prosecutor at the UN Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, and he said to N1's Amir Zukic that the genocide in Srebrenica was not only preventable, like you said yourself, like Guillaume Ancel said it himself, but it was very much predictable as well, and assessed and executed with knowledge of the international community, United Nations, United States, Europe. Everybody knows, like you said yourself, like you said it yourself, everybody's complicit. So let's watch it.
Je li tačno, gospodine Najs, evo kad govorimo već o Miloševiću, da je neko od međunarodnih dužnosnika rekao Miloševiću uoči pada Srebrenice i uoči genocida koji se tamo desio zapravo da snage Vojske Republike Srpske mogu ući u Srebrenicu i da neće biti nikakve vojne intervencije NATO-a ili UN-a. Pitam vas to zato što sam pročitao iz mnogo izvora zapravo da je tako nešto izgovoreno Miloševiću, odmah potom i Mladiću u Beogradu.
I think this is a
Mislim da je to ključno pitanje na koje treba dati odgovor kako bismo za sobom ostavili tačan istorijat patnje ljudi Srebrenice. To je pitanje na kojem ja i drugi još uvijek radimo, da dobijemo odgovor prije nego što preminu svi koji bi mogli imati relevantna saznanja. Jasni dokazi, recimo iz dokumenata State Departmenta, je da 28. maja je postignut sporazum između Amerike, Velike Britanije i Francuske, možda još jedne zemlje. To je takozvani tihi, prešutni sporazum da neće bombardovati u odbranu Srebrenice. Isti sporazum se spominje ponovo u dokumentu State Departmenta sljedeći dan uz potpis predsjednika Clintona. U 6 sedmica koje su uslijedile od tog dana i Mladićevog ulaska u Srebrenicu nema dokaza da se taj sporazum izmijenio. Mi samo znamo da taj sporazum, taj dogovor nije prenijet holandskom bataljonu ili bosanskim muslimanima. Sljedeće što znamo je da zahtjev za podršku, zračnu podršku Srebrenici 10. jula na to general Janvier nije odgovorio, tako da ujutro 11. jula holandski bataljon je očekivao desetine bombardera koji će napasti identifikovane lokacije. Nijedan se nije pojavio. Tako da, kada je Mladić ušao u grad, nije gledao gore, jer je znao da ne mora. Pitanje na koje još uvijek tražimo odgovor je da li je to znao zato što je sam shvatio, sam je nekako naslutio ili je imao obavještajne podatke o kojima mi ne znamo ili mu je neko direktno prenio informaciju ili njemu ili Miloševiću ili ga je Milošević obavijestio. Trenutno su to špekulacije, nagađanje, ali ove eksterne tačke, ovo što imamo, dogovor, nemijenjanje dogovora, Janvier koji ne izdaje naredbu za bombardovanje i Mladić koji ima pouzdanje da ušeta u Srebrenicu, to su stvari koje su jasne. I još uvijek postoje među živima ljudi koji mogu imati informacije o tome kako se tačno moglo desiti da Mladić ima to pogubno samopouzdanje koje je dovelo do smrti više od 8.000 ljudi.
Krupno je ovo što ste sada rekli, zato sam pustio da ispričate.
Another testimony, your friend, Sir Jeffrey Nice, former prosecutor, yes, he said pretty much the same. Everybody's complicit. He talked about what we heard about those days that Srebrenica was happening. What is your recollection of conversation you had with Sir Jeffrey Nice as well?
Carla Del Ponte, when she spoke to me, sent Jeffrey Nice to New York to meet with me, to work on a deposition. So I've known him before the trial. He helped me to prepare my deposition. And I had, throughout the years, I had a lot of contacts with him, and we continue actually working on the issue of Srebrenica, because him, like me and others, are very concerned that if the Bosnian people do not do the effort to tell the world what happened here, all those brave and courageous people who die here would have died in vain. Because people, today, Ukraine swamps everything. Tomorrow will be something else. And who will remember what Srebrenica is about when even the young people here do not know very much what happened. And I always put the example of the Jewish people, that they have not wasted one day without reminding the world of the Holocaust. So the Holocaust is impossible to forget. But anyhow,
or deny.
Or deny. They do it daily. In all the media that they can afford, have access to. I say there's a moral duty of the Bosniaks, and the best homage they can pay to the people who die, who suffer so much, is to really be active in promoting what happened here.
And not just Bosniaks, everybody included in this country. Bosnians, Herzegovinians, citizens, every person with any common sense, and the moral duty of a human being to keep reminding so it doesn't happen again. But again, like you said in the beginning, seems like we haven't learned the lessons, or we've learned the lessons that it can happen again and people can get away with it. I want to talk to you about the current dilemmas in Bosnian public, especially when it comes to convicted war criminals. We need to put another thing on the record for everybody to understand, since it has been a major public discussion about how to behave when it comes to convicted war criminals who already served a sentence or who are still serving the sentence, genocide, glorification of war crimes, glorification. We are not talking about Srebrenica. We're talking about cities in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Mostar, what happened in Mostar, what happened in Banja Luka, what happened in Prijedor, what happened in Sarajevo, the longest siege in modern history, of a city in modern history. This is very interesting. So the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina president, Lidija Bradara, reaffirmed her stance that the convicted war criminal, Dario Kordic, does not cease to be her friend privately. All right, you have your friends privately. But when it comes to public life and somebody who is appointed such high position in Federation, representing all the citizens of Federation, what does that tell us, having convicted war criminals and promoting them in the public as somebody who is appointed for all citizens? Is that something that should happen? Second thing, of course, international community in Bosnia and Herzegovina said that her comments are divisive and inflammatory, but nothing happened. We just keep saying things, but nothing. There's no repercussion of the actions of those who are supposed to be an example for everybody how to respect the social justice, the criminal justice, and international rule of law. So what do you think about that? What are your thoughts on this?
You know, in a simple word, it's so abominable to hear that this is happening. It is like Karadzic's party have representative in Congress, in Parliament. You know, we should absolutely be forbidden. It's like having the Hitler's party today participating in Germany. You know, nobody would think that that's possible. But here, it seems like everything is possible. You know, again, we come to what we spoke a few minutes back. The institutional structure that was imposed to the Bosnian allows these kind of things to happen. If this was a regular sovereign country without the constraints that the international community imposed, what you and I are talking would not happen. It would be inconceivable. It would be punished, rejected. Here, they just make a slap and make the inflammatory comments are serious, but nothing will happen to them.
Nothing. And then a couple of days later, Culture Minister for Federation, Sanja Vlaisavljević, said that war criminals had already served their sentence and they should be reinstated, rehabilitated, and re-socialized into the society where they committed those crimes. What does the international law says when it comes to this? She's talking about humanitarian laws, which has absolutely, obviously, it's ridiculous. Should war criminals that serve their sentences be resocialized and reinstated in the public and in the society? How do we act in that? I mean, we have to put it on the record. How do we treat this matter today? Even though if we know, but we have to hear it from you and put it on the record.
Officially, nothing would happen, because they would say that they have already complied with the law. There would be you could find all kinds of legal excuses, but you cannot find one moral reason for that to happen, one political valid point to allow that to happen, knowing fully well that to reinsert them into the system would allow them again to continue or re-continue what they started in a different fashion. I think this is not only playing with fire, it's playing with the sentiments, with the feelings, or the horrors, like Rommel or von Ribbentrop coming back and be reintroduced into the German society. This is what happened in here. Do you think that, for example, when we're talking now, the Dario Kordic, who served his sentence, is no longer a war criminal? No, he will always be a war criminal, regardless of the time that they gave him. You can say legally, well, he's not anymore in prison. That's true, but he continues to be a war criminal. And talking about rehabilitation and reinstatement into the society, is that something that the politicians should keep promoting here, but because they are? What should be the repercussion for continuing doing this? Because obviously the law is not working. The law is not working. Everybody can obviously be appointed to a certain position, which is very important in Bosnia and Herzegovina, whether Federation Republic of Srpska or Brčko district, and just say and do whatever they want without any repercussions. How do we stop being that and doing that? Who should be the one that says no more? You know, I came back 10 years after the Srebrenica genocide to participate in a ceremony. And I saw a lot of heads of states saying then the opposite of what they did before. But what struck my attention was that the policemen that were guarding the place, they were all Serbs. And I said, this is amazing. He is the greatest crime committed, and the ones who are in charge are the criminals. So to me, that was more than enough to know that there will not be any kind of reprisals. Because imagine the policemen taking the custody of the place were the ones who created this monumental crime. And they are walking next to you, and you don't know how many people they kill, etc., etc. And they were the Serb policemen. It's like Nazis guarding Auschwitz. Yes, yes. How ridiculous would that be? Well, I think that's a very good example. And that's the way I felt. Not only how uncomfortable, but I said how terrible that after all this, because, you know, people forget that the first time that the United Nations with Lord Carrington and David Owen and Cyrus Vance did the first plans to divide Bosnia and Herzegovina, Srebrenica was from the beginning given to the Serbs. Because, you know, it was geographically the linkage to Serb. So from day one, it was always an objective. And at the end, they reached the objective. After killing 200,000 people, violating 20,000 women, and moving away more than 1 million people. Ethnic cleansing taking place. You said something really good. Imagine how families of the victims are feeling, seeing the perpetrator right around them. It is something that you can't see anywhere else, but in Europe at least, but here. Do you have any optimism for Bosnia and Herzegovina, for the region, for Serbia, Croatia, Montenegro? Or is this, as the name says it, Balkan, the bloody soil, is something that we cannot escape? You know, the territorial space of former Yugoslavia is extraordinary. There are extraordinary people in all those parts. I always said that you cannot talk of the Serbs or the Croats or the Bosnians. When I refer to the Serbs, I'm thinking of Milosevic, Karadzic, and Mladic. This lady who was the president of the Srpska Republic. Because I think the main traitors to Serbia were Milosevic and all those people who actually put to shame the name of the countrymen. And I just give you an example, which I repeated sometimes. President Izetbegovic, once in his visit to New York, came to visit me, and he says, Ambassador Arria, I would like to thank you for what you and your country are doing for us. And I said, Mr. President, allow me to interrupt you. I am Catholic. I am not Muslim. And I assure you that if you were doing to the Serbs what the Serbs are doing to you, I will be as harsh against you as I'm doing against the Serbs. I wanted to prove to him that this was not that they were Muslim.
You are impartial.
I was impartial. I was independent.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
He looked at me, but he got the point.
Do you think that he knew about Srebrenica?
You know, yes,
it has been said that he...
I had a wonderful meeting with General Sefir Halilovic, whom I was a fan of him for many years, because I followed and I said to him that in my book, I did not touch any more on the whether Izetbegovic knew, whether Izetbegovic ordered the withdrawal of Oric and all the people, because it was part of my commitment. Because I didn't know that happened. I only knew that
you didn't want to speculate.
No, and especially to speculate with the party that was being attacked and massacred, like was the case of President Izetbegovic.
And no means of defending themselves because of the embargo on the arms. Imagine that happening today in Ukraine, when the country is being invaded and terrorized, to put an embargo on the arms so people defend themselves. That is unimaginable.
I don't know whether you...
Go figure.
Yeah, go figure, if you know about it. At the beginning of '92, an embargo was put on former Yugoslavia, Bosnia, etc. I thought that was very good.
Until you realize who had the arms.
And I remember the Hungarian ambassador said, no, this is a great mistake. Because there is only... So what does it mean? That Venezuela or Pakistan didn't know this is forgivable. But the major countries knew perfectly well that Serbia was fully equipped and that the Croats were getting help from the Germans. The only defenseless party was Bosnia. And what did they have in mind? So, well, this, in a few weeks, a little bit like Putin in Ukraine, these people will be defeated, and then the whole thing will be calmed down, and we don't have any more the confrontation with the Muslims. What happened? That the Bosnians did not follow the script and didn't roll down like a dog and play dead. No. They became inventive, creative, resistant, and courageous, and they almost defeated their aggressors.
Your Excellency, thank you so much.
No, I thank you. I thank you.
Thank you so much for sitting with me and telling me all the details. And it's such an honor. Such an honor, sir, to
thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you. This was Venezuelan diplomat, former UN Security Council President, of course, Sarajevo honorary citizen, Mr. Diego Arria. Amica Ferrer-Gotic, stay with us.